Archaeologists find many relics of the past in the course of their job, but they only understand some of them. When they come across a puzzle they can't solve, they'll turn to historians and scientists for help. Even then, though, there are still some finds that defy all attempts to explain them. We've got some truly mystifying finds for you in this video. In many cases, they're still not fully understood, even after years of research. If we told you that an amazing discovery had been made beneath some sand dunes, you'd probably assume we're talking about Egypt. In this case, though, we're talking about Spain. In May 2021, these stunning Roman baths were found under the sand dunes of Trafalgar Cape in southern Spain. The discovery was made during an archaeological survey of the area. The remaining walls of these ancient structures, which were built about 2,000 years ago, stand 20 feet tall. It seems amazing that nobody knew they were there for all these years, but the dune that concealed them was closer to 30 feet high. Many of the local residents have fond memories of running up and down the dunes as children, blissfully unaware they were literally trampling all over history. The sand has done a good job of protecting the baths. The windows, walls, and doors are still visible in many places, as is the clever central heating system that distributed heat throughout the buildings through gaps beneath the floor and between the walls. There was a fish farm and a salting center here during Roman times, so the baths were probably built as a facility for the workers. Our next discovery comes from Ukraine, where a very unusual kurgan was found in early 2021. The kurgan, which is another name for burial mound, was well buried and took several months to fully excavate. This was actually an accidental discovery. It was found by construction workers laying a new road into the nearby village of Novoaleksandrivka. What makes the mound so unusual is its sheer size. It's 400 feet wide and 250 feet long, with a height of 20 feet. Not only that, but it appears that people came here to bury their dead for hundreds of years. 24 burials have been found within the kurgan thus far, starting in the Bronze Age and continuing throughout the Scythian Age and the Middle Ages. Based on fragments of ceramics that appear to be left over from the construction of the mound, it was probably made around 5,500 years ago. An enormous number of ground-up shells have also been found in the lower layers of the mound. Their purpose is unknown. Restoration work will be performed on the mound after the last of the excavation work is finished, and then a museum will be opened at the site. Speaking of burial sites that were used for hundreds of years, here's a puzzling collection of rock-cut tombs carved into the cliffs of Al-Himidiya in Sohag, Egypt. There are just over 250 tombs at the site, the first of which was carved about 4,200 years ago, and the last of which was cut about 2,000 years after that. The nature of the burials that took place here seems to have changed dramatically over time. During the first 8 or 9 centuries of the site's use, the people laid to rest here were very rich, very powerful, or both. They were given large chambers with decorated walls and ceilings, often with cross halls to go with them. By the end, the archaeological evidence suggests that the site was used to bury commoners. Their tombs are much more modest, consisting of little other than a small niche carved into the rock. We don't know for what reason, if any, the nature of the burials changed. Nor do we know why the ancient Egyptians spontaneously decided to stop burying people here after using the site for such a long time. In June 2020, Israeli archaeologists from the Hebrew University made a unique discovery while excavating the ancient city of Lachish in the Judean plain. There, they found an ornate bronze scepter topped with a layer of silver. According to their research, the artifact is around 3,200 years old and might be connected with an ancient Canaanite god. They think their discovery was once part of a statue of a Canaanite deity that would have stood in the corner of a temple. Such statues are discussed in the Bible and are always described as holding a scepter. For that reason, the find has been nicknamed the Scepter of God. In truth, it looks more like a spatula than a scepter. It's only the presence of symbols engraved on the object that marks it out as something other than a tool. The meaning of the symbols is sadly unknown. It might be that they have no meaning at all beyond decoration, but the arrangement of the patterns seems specific and deliberate. There's much that we don't know about this ancient culture, but finds like this move us one step further along the road to knowing them better. This next find is one of the most bizarre we've ever discussed on our channel. In 1979, this shrunken head prop was used in a movie called Wise Blood. Sometime after the film was made, the prop ended up in the hands of Mercer University in Georgia, USA. That's when a disturbing discovery was made. While the object might have been used as a prop, there's nothing fake about it. This is a genuine shrunken human head. After the researchers there got over the shock, they managed to unpick the head's true history. It's now thought that biologist Jim Harrison acquired the head, known as a Santa, while visiting Ecuador in 1942. It was Harrison who loaned it to the film production crew in 1979, but he neglected to tell them it was real. Hundreds of fake Santas were made to satisfy macabre Western tastes in the 1950s and 1960s, so the film crew had no reason to believe this one was real. Once the truth became known, Mercer University decided the best thing to do was to send the Santa back home to Ecuador, which they did via the Ecuadorian consulate. That was probably the strangest request they had to deal with all year. The Romans gave the world many fantastic inventions, but perhaps none were better than the aqueduct. And perhaps no Roman aqueduct is greater than the aqueduct of Constantinople. Building this enormous structure would have taken hundreds of people decades to achieve, and maintaining it might have even been harder. When a study group from the Johannes Gutenberg University Mainz studied the aqueduct in early 2021, they got an insight into just how hard that process would have been. To their surprise, they found that the entire structure was scraped clean of carbonate deposits at least once per decade for the entire 7 centuries that the aqueduct remained active. Considering the fact it runs on for more than 70 miles, that's a gargantuan task. It's even more impressive when you consider the size of the masonry channels, which in places are large enough for human beings to walk through without having to duck. Because of the diligent work of the Romans, the aqueduct was still in perfect working order time of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines took over where the Romans had left off, presumably using the same mysterious cleaning methods to keep the water flowing. What do you think the oldest stone monuments in the world are? Stonehenge in England? Wrong. The pyramids of Egypt? Not even close. The correct answer is the Mustatils of Saudi Arabia. Thanks to a relatively recent study of these strange monuments, we now know that they were created around 7,000 years ago. Regrettably, we still don't know their purpose. Although the size of the Mustatils varies, they're all the same rectangular shape, with raised platforms at each end. Archaeologists have found animal skulls and horns in the center of some of the monuments, which might mean that ritual or sacrificial activity took place within them. Alternatively, it might mean that they were animal enclosures. If so, they would be the oldest known examples of humans keeping animals. There are well over 1,000 Mustatils in Saudi Arabia, scattered over an area of more than 300 square miles. The fact that Neolithic-era people undertook such an enormous construction task flies in the face of almost everything we think we know about them. Everything about the Mustatils leaves us with more questions than answers. For several hundred years, a bronze cannon from the Spanish Armada laid undisturbed at the bottom of the sea close to Ribera, Spain. Within days of its discovery, it went missing. and was eventually recovered by the police. The cannon is one of 3 that were found by Spanish fishermen in April 2021. They reported their find to the appropriate regional authorities, but when the Navy arrived at the scene to recover the 16th century artifacts, they found just 2. Clearly, one of the fishermen had returned since their discovery to take one home as a souvenir. The guilty party was arrested for committing a cultural heritage offense, along with 3 members of their family. Archaeologists think the cannons came from a ship sent by Spanish King Philip II to battle English forces in October 1596, long after the defeat of the original Spanish Armada. The ship never made it to the battle. It sank during a storm as one of 20 lost close to Cape Finisterre. Now the 3 cannons have been reunited. They're in the hands of the Galician Sea Museum in Vigo for restoration and, eventually, public display. Hundreds of mummified bodies have been found in Egypt over the years. Many of them are in museums or private collections. Of all the mummies that have ever been found, none is like the one we see here. When it was discovered in 1826, it was thought to be the remains of a male priest. We don't blame the archaeologists of the time for coming to that conclusion. The name of the priest was inscribed on the sarcophagus the mummy was found with. At the start of 2021, a team of experts in Poland decided to perform a new study on the mummy. To their immense surprise, they found it wasn't a male priest. In fact, it wasn't even a male. These are the mummified remains of a pregnant woman. This is the first and only discovery of a pregnant mummy in history. While all of the usual mummification processes have been carried out on the rest of her body, her womb and the baby inside it, it hasn't been possible to determine why she died. Were left untouched. She would have been in her mid-20s when she passed away and was probably only 2 months away from giving birth. For all their technological achievements, the Romans never got around to inventing clockwork. If they wanted to work out the time, they used a sundial. If they wanted to check the time while on the move, they probably used tiny pocket sundials like this one. The surprisingly elaborate artifact was found during an excavation of Piazza dei Moraccioli in Pisa, Italy during the 1980s. Due to a clerical error, it ended up being mislabeled and put into the wrong box, effectively resulting in it being forgotten on a shelf in a university for more than 30 years. It wasn't until a curious student opened the box in April 2021 that it saw the light of day again. What amazed both the student and the other experts who've since examined it is the intricacy of its design. The time grid that was etched into its ivory surface 2,200 years ago is delicate and detailed, still capable of telling the time today. Only one other ivory sundial has ever been found, and that one came from Egypt. The cost of the exceptional craftsmanship that went into the creation of this timepiece was probably quite high, so we can assume that the sundial belonged to someone important. There's been a flurry of archaeological discoveries in Egypt recently, but this one is surely the most impressive. In April 2021, archaeologists in the country confirmed the incredible discovery of an entire city. Such is the size of the previously unknown settlement that archaeologists expect to spend the next 10 years excavating it. The city, which has provisionally been named the Rise of Aten, has spent the past 3,000 years buried under the sand of the Egyptian desert east of Luxor. Excitingly, this appears to be the largest ancient settlement ever discovered in the country. Its size suggests great importance, which might mean the presence of several buried ancient kings and queens. Very little is known about the city so far, but the current working theory is that it was founded by Amenhotep III around 3,400 years ago and lasted throughout the time of Tutankhamun and I. So far, archaeologists have been working through buildings used to store meat and produce bricks. They hope to start excavating temples by September 2021. Some of the homes in and around the brick factories are so well preserved that they still have everyday household objects in them. So the temples might prove to be the richest ever found in Egypt. If you wanted to draw up a legal document in the 12th century, you'd have to go and find a scrap of sheepskin to write it on. That probably sounds bizarre to you, but the practice of writing contracts on sheepskin was still happening as recently as the start of the 20th century. The reason for this was a simple but effective one. Sheepskin contains several layers of fat, and obvious marks on its surface are made if the fat is scratched away. If someone tried to change or remove details from a document written on sheepskin parchment, their attempt to do so would be easy to see. Sheepskin was, therefore, used for the prevention of fraud. It might even be the case that the practice goes back further than the 12th century. We know it was in use by then because it's referred to by the writings of former Lord Treasurer of England Richard Fitz-Neal, who mentions it in his extremely dry manuscript Dialogus de Sicario. But there's nothing to say that it wasn't an already well-established practice by Fitz-Neal's time. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!